My name is Hank Wood, and I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, March 15th, 1941. I grew up here, graduated from Roosevelt High School, and earned a NROTC scholarship to Yale University. This picture is the picture that they took of all of us in 1967 when we were going over. And the purpose of the picture was, if we were captured, it would give them an image to compare if there was a news release from the North Vietnamese and they would show a picture of a prisoner, they could compare this to the picture of you when you went over. I feel very fortunate to be here. In my life, in this period, I would say I was fairly self-centered. Because I thought that I could survive just about anything that the enemy could throw at me, and fortunately did. So I'm here to tell that story. It was pretty exciting. As a matter of fact, you got the feeling that you were impervious to what the enemy could do. You almost felt like there was some blessing that was with you. I can remember a few times saying, "Thank you, God," when I came through all of that. When I came through all of the flak on the way down and got through it. The profession was one that I thrilled doing. That competitive business with the enemy, much like I felt in the athletics that I did before I went to college, much like the academic competition that you feel. It's that desire to conquer and win. And you are being very dangerous as you do your combat mission. But then we in the Navy had a big challenge also. When we returned to the ship, we had to land on the aircraft carrier, which was a very challenging thing. I've had 670 carrier landings. 211 of them were at night. A night carrier landing, especially if the boat's moving around a little bit and the weather's not so good, it can make you get vertigo, and you have to believe your instruments until you finally break out and then orient yourself and land on the carrier. It was very interesting sometimes in the combat missions. The Navy aircraft always seemed to be fairly limited in the fuel that we had. So when we would be working with a forward air controller at night to bomb the supply roads over in Laos even, and if the Air Force was there too, they would hold high and dry to allow us to be the first to drop our bombs. And I can remember one night the FAC had fired a rocket and said, "Okay, bomb 180 degrees, 50 meters from my smoke, or from my rocket." And in our runs, my wingman and I, the enemy shot at us a good deal. And the Air Force pilot, one of the Air Force pilots commented, "Boy, that was pretty hairy." And my RIO came back right away and said, "Not as hairy as the night landing we're going to make on the carrier when we get back." The guy in the back of an F-4 was, in a way, a little bit of a victim. He didn't have a stick in a Navy airplane, a Navy F-4, so there was no control other than to say to the pilot, "You're low, you're slow, you're not on center line." He could kibitz from the back seat a good deal, and he was a tremendous, tremendous helper. We took off from the Kitty Hawk in the Gulf of Tonkin, and we were going around the DMZ to go up into Laos and to bomb in the area where the enemy trucks would move at night. And about the time we got south of the DMZ, demilitarized zone that divided North Vietnam from South Vietnam, an Air Force controller came up and said, "Bandits, bandits, bullseye 180, 50 miles. That meant that the MiGs were flying 50 miles south of Hanoi. He said, "If you're fighter equipped, come up this frequency." My RIO was on that frequency in a half a minute and said, "We're fighter equipped." He said, and he said, "Where are you?" And we told him, and he said, "Your vector is 360 gate." You don't usually get that kind of a command. What that meant was go straight north and go into full afterburner. So we headed north, and we said we have bombs because we were going to bomb. And he said, "You're over North Vietnam. You can put them wherever you want to." So we pickled our bombs off, going straight north. My RIO, a very skilled guy on the radar, got a contact on the MiG. We were getting vectors getting vectors and guidance as to where the MiG fighter was, and he locked him up. And we were about 40 miles at that point. We closed to about 30 miles, and the MiG turned back to the north. And the pulse Doppler radar broke lock. That's where you've got a closing coming like head on. So what he was doing was turning away from us, and the radar broke lock. So we then had to go to the pulse mode, where he could then find the contact. And at the same time, the MiG started descending. So we're following the MiG down, trying to figure exactly where we are over the mountains of North Vietnam, the Karst Mountains. And the next thing that comes out of the back seat of my airplane is, "Brake starboard, brake starboard." He saw a missile coming up from the right-hand side of our airplane. My wingman was tucked in, and we both broke hard into the missile, as hard as we could. The missile passed my airplane and exploded close enough to to my wingman's airplane to cause hydraulic problems for him. We had to take him back to Da Nang to land because he had a hydraulic problem. And that was a very harrowing experience. I think the summary was we got sucked into a SAM trap. They were doing that very much on purpose. So it was a wily enemy. When you think of how they held at bay 550,000 Americans with high-tech jets, with weapons that could destroy things on the ground, and just like they defeated the French, they held us at bay. When I was on the Kitty Hawk from 1970 to 1972, I was needing the combat experience, which every career officer needs. I did get it, 250 combat missions. I also was the maintenance officer of the 12-plane F-4 squadron and had 250 people who maintained that airplane working for me. And at the same time, I was doing something a little extra. I was standing bridge watches on the deck of the Kitty Hawk. At the end of that time, I qualified as an officer of the deck for combat operations and for fleet operations in combat. It was a qualification that got a concurrent fitness report that made me extremely proud. I didn't get to see many movies in the ready room, as some of the other aviators did, but it was a real accomplishment, and I was very, very proud of that experience. The logbooks that I brought are one of those things that oftentimes you go back to check and see what you were doing and when you were doing it. I went into my logbook here and I found out that on the 22nd of November, 1963, I flew 2 flights in the T-34 aircraft at Sofley Field in Pensacola, Florida. So the likelihood, in my estimation, when John Kennedy was shot, I was in the air and probably didn't learn about it until I got back on the ground. So that was just one of the interesting things, but these books report 3,000 flight hours in military aircraft, 2,000, almost 2,000 in the F-4 and 500 in the F-104. I even got some time in the C-1, which was the airplane that brought mail and passengers aboard the carrier. This is the picture of when I returned. That was on the front page of the San Diego newspaper. And you'll see in the background my airplane, but you can see my wife looking askance at the beard. I have to say that the beard probably lasted an hour after we got home. It was interesting. The oxygen that I wore, the oxygen mask right here, would bleach this area of the beard. So that part of it was kind of a bright orange. The rest of it was dark, as you can see in that picture. The Vietnam War was one that was certainly not appreciated by the American people. We did not have the support that the brave generation did in World War II. We didn't have people who were willing to work in the aircraft factories and devote our total economy to this. We were very much like the Korean War people who were sort of fighting a forgotten war, except the Vietnam War raised a lot of anger among people. My family, we lived in Del Mar, California when I was in Vietnam, flying off the USS Kitty Hawk in 1970 through 72. And we were regarded as outcasts in our neighborhood, a very nice suburban neighborhood. Being an officer in the Navy was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. My total active duty ended up almost 15 years. In that time, I ended up making commander, which was a very proud moment. But it was also a moment that I resigned to go back to TWA to fly with the airlines. What a foolish move. I should have stayed 5 more years and had the opportunity to retire at 20 years or have been promoted to higher rank and retire at 30 years. But that's the kind of mistake you make. But this was the dichotomy that existed in my life all the time that I was in the Navy. How do you have a family have two daughters, lovely daughters, and give them the time that you want to. When you're making 6 cruises, long cruises, when you are preparing for those cruises, going in and out of port a lot, I spent a lot of time away from home, which made it very difficult to be a family man. And that's the reason that I resigned twice from the Navy, once after 6 years and the other after almost 15 years.